blood, frogs, hail. But before there are plagues, before there are miracles, this Parsha asks a harder question, a more dangerous question. Who gets to wield power and who checks it? God's opening words to Moses are not poetic. They are confrontational. Ani Adonai, I am God. I am the Lord. This is not theology for theology's sake. It is a direct challenge to Pharaoh's claim that his authority is absolute. Pharaoh believes that power justifies itself. Further, in Egyptian society, Pharaoh believed that he was a god. God, Adonai, responds, no. You are human, and no human authority is unchecked. That tension between power and moral restraint is the beating heart of the Parsha, and it is the question pressing on us now in our own time. The Torah gives one of its most psychologically honest verses. Velo sham'u el Moshe mikotzer ruach ume'avodah kasha. They, the people of Israel, could not listen to Moses because of the shortness of their spirit and crushing labor. The Israelites do not reject God. They cannot hear hope. Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch explains that Egypt's deepest cruelty was not physical exhaustion alone, but the destruction of inner freedom, shlilat cherut haruach. When a human being's spirit is constricted, even redemption sounds like a threat. Pharaoh does not merely enslave bodies, he enslaves imagination. And when imagination dies, oppression no longer needs chains. That is what unrestrained power can do. This week, in a New York Times interview, President Trump said that the only check on me is my own morality. Those words should stop us cold, not because of who said them, but because of what they claim. The Torah's answer is unequivocal. Power may never be self-policing. Pharaoh also believed himself moral. He believed order depended on him alone. The era exists to dismantle that idea. Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, Zichrono Livracha, warned that the greatest danger of power is not wickedness, but certainty. The belief that one's own judgment requires no restraint. The Torah insists no human being is the final judge of their own righteousness. That is why Moses returns repeatedly, not to persuade Pharaoh, but to name limits. Many biblical scholars, joined by classical Jewish commentators, understand the plagues not merely as more than just punishments, but as a sustained confrontation with Egypt's gods. The Nile turns to blood, a judgment on Hapi, the god of the river. Darkness overwhelms Ra, the god of the sun. Livestock perish, a blow to Egyptian sacred animal cults. The Ramban Nachmanides makes this explicit. The plagues come levatel Elohei Mitzrayim, to nullify the false gods of Egypt and expose the lie that power sanctifies itself. God is not only freeing slaves, God is dismantling a theology, because tyranny always cloaks itself in righteousness. It always claims inevitability. It always insists there's no higher court of appeal. The era answers, there is. This week's events in Minneapolis are not abstract to me. I went to the University of Minnesota. Minneapolis shaped my thinking, my friendships, much of my moral formation. And this week, that city has been living in fear. An ICE operation ended in the killing of Renee Nicole Good. Investigations will determine legality. But Torah forces us to ask today a different question. What happens when enforcement loses moral restraint? ICE exists to uphold the law. Pharaoh believed he upheld order. The Torah does not reject authority. Rather, it seeks to limit it. Again, the Ramban teaches that Pharaoh's sin was refusal, seruv lahakir bigvulot hakoach, refusal to recognize any authority above himself. When power answers only to itself, violence follows. When people are afraid to leave their homes, to go to school, because they're closed to protect children from government, when armed agents en masse instill fear rather than safety, Torah hears the echo of Egypt, and God says, I hear their cry. My colleague and friend, Rabbi Harold Kravitz, who's the immediate past president of the Rabbinical Assembly and a Minnesota resident, stood this week at the site of Renee Good's killing. He reflected on the Parsha and reminded us that the Exodus story begins not with Moses, but with Shifra and Puah, midwives who found the courage to disobey an immoral decree. They did not overthrow Pharaoh. They did not overthrow a system. They refused to cooperate with evil. Rabbi Kravitz shared that many Jews in the Twin Cities are now training to be nonviolent, protective witnesses to ICE activity, standing present, documenting, attempting to hold power accountable without violence. This is not radical. This is Torah. The book of Deuteronomy, Devarim, demands, V'ahavtam et hager, you must love the stranger, ki gerim hayitem be'eretz Mitzrayim, because you were strangers in the land of Egypt. Not sentiment, obligation. I also heard from a member of our community, Judy Libman, who shared with me an account from her cousin in Minneapolis, describing families afraid to leave their homes, undocumented immigrants sheltering in place, schools disrupted because of enforcement activity. This is what fear looks like on the ground, and fear is not a byproduct of tyranny. It's not a byproduct, it's a strategy. At the same time, one can't help but turn their gaze towards the Middle East and to Iran. People, especially women, continue to risk their lives to protest a regime that controls bodies, speech, and conscience, that for the last several days has imposed a near total blackout of the internet and phone lines. And someone told me this morning as I was coming into synagogue that the news this morning is reporting that they intend to maintain that blackout for another 2 months. Now just imagine what that means. People are beaten, arrested, executed at point-blank range. Some reports as many as 20,000 human beings. What is most haunting to me is not just the brutality, but as a Jew who has experienced the ravages of antisemitism cloaked as anti-Zionism over the last 2 months, seeing our streets filled with protesters feigning a concern for human rights, what is most haunting for me is the silence of the larger community, of those who claim to speak for human rights. The Torah does not allow us to be selective. V'yishma Elohim et na'akatam, God hears the groaning of those who suffer. Hearing is a moral act. Silence is also a moral act, or rather, a lack thereof. And then, it's been a busy news week. Then there's Mississippi, a synagogue attacked, Torah's damaged, yet surviving. Antisemitism is never random. It is an attempt to erase memory. Pharaoh understood that. That's why he targeted Hebrew children. But Torah survives because covenant outlasts fire. V'lakachti echem li la'am. God says to us that he will take us to be his people. That promise has outlived empires. Moses does not control outcomes. He controls faithfulness. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel taught that prophets are not predictors of the future, but disturbers of complacency. Those who refuse to let power fall asleep morally. Vayera teaches that leadership is not domination. It is moral persistence. For a community like ours, that means that we should refuse to be silent when power hardens. We refuse despair when spirits are crushed. We refuse the fantasy that morality polices itself. We may not stop every injustice, but we will not normalize fear. We will not bless unaccountable power. We will not forget who we are. Vayera teaches that redemption does not begin with miracles. It begins with limits, with the insistence that power is accountable, that authority is not self-justifying, that God hears the cry of the vulnerable. God does not ask us to be Pharaoh. God asks us to be Moses, to speak when others fall silent, to listen when others harden their hearts, to trust that even when spirits are crushed, covenant remains. This is not ancient history. This is not simply a biblical story told long ago. This is our work. This is now. Shabbat Shalom.